Okay, people, this is what, September 10th, I think it is, 2017. Anyways, pretty early in the morning. It's like 8 o'clock in the morning here. And I'm taking this amendment and I'm rewriting it. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm taking 171 pages that I wrote, you can see, and I'm going to bring it down to maximum 20 pages. And again, people, I'm going to use my heart. Okay, people, so what I'm finding here, I'm only on page 4, right? But I'm finding that what this person did in terms of just like, you know, narrowing it down or whatever is being actually very helpful. Okay, people, it's like 1:45 in the morning here. As you can see, I look very, very ugly. I'm just getting uglier and uglier, people. You can see me getting sick. With all this stress, with the city of Surrey, now we got social workers showing up for porch inspections and God knows what else. You know, this court stuff with Uncle John, because they stab you in the heart, right? If they're not working you to death, they're stabbing you in the heart, right? They come in waves. Right? They dumb down the population where people don't know how to write even a sentence anymore. Never mind spell words correctly. And write proper sentences with proper paragraphs and just the whole 9 yards, right? You know, they got this cell phone stuff with all this little texting going on, right? Okay, all this stuff here. Now, a while back, I don't know how far back, but it was a while back when I was trying to attempt to do an amendment before. You know, I was trying to do some research on how to do it. So what I'm doing here is I'm going off at the top of my memory in terms of you take your original notice of claim and I think you have to resubmit it right along with your notice of, or right along with your amendment. So in other words, you have to resubmit the original notice of claim that has lines drawn through it. And if you change a word or a phrase or a sentence, I think it's supposed to be written right on to the original notice of claim, in addition to the new copy of the amendment, so that it can be cross-referenced in terms of the information basically remaining the same with the adjustments on the amendment that's taken from the original notice of claim. Well, anyway, I have 171 pages with my notice of claim with Fraser Health Authority, and right now I'm only on page 45. And I have been here all day, people. I went out once for about 45 minutes to the walnut tree with Andre to get some fresh air. But outside of that, I've been pretty much sitting here since, I don't know, 9:30, 10 o'clock this morning, and it's 1 o'clock in the morning. And trust me, I can barely see. The pressure in my eyes, I know for a fact, were right off the roof because I've not been feeling well at all. I have not been feeling well for a while. And just by looking at me, you can see I'm getting skinnier and skinnier. I'm looking gaunt. I'm looking tired. I'm looking worn out. I'm looking pale. I'm basically starting to look ill. Like a sickly woman. From all the hard work that I'm doing that's not getting me anywhere in life. Because people just walk on by, for the most part, and don't really acknowledge it. And in fact, they do the opposite. They say it's not enough. Right? So, this is what happens when you become a whistleblower. You get eaten alive by vultures who want to protect their industry of devouring everything in their path, basically. Alright. So, I'm assuming that I'm doing this right. Whether I am or not remains to be seen. I mean, all this stuff is pertinent, but not for some people. Right? I'm on page 11 at a 10-point font. And I'm only on page 46. But a lot of this stuff I can draw lines through. Okay, people, I'm pretty disappointed here because, like, serious, I'm on page 52, right? And this is page 52 of this thing here. And I'm on page 11 of a 20-page order. I'm only allowed, people, 20 pages to tell the story with material facts. I'm supposed to tell the story, give the allegations. You have to tell the story, a statement of facts, right? Okay? And then you have to provide the allegations, right? With the material facts. And then they want the legal basis, and they're asking for what you want for relief sought. And I'm supposed to do that within 20 pages, where technically there are 74 infractions under the Criminal Code of Canada that would fall under the category of white-collar crime that very few people ever get prosecuted for. Unless, of course, they're really kind of seedy people. But we're talking about white-collar, the ones that run around in suits and drive nice cars and have shiny shoes. Those ones never really get charged under the Criminal Code of Canada. Very few and far in between. Anyway, it's now 1:30 in the morning. And I've been here since 9:30, 10:30, 9 o'clock. No, I got up at like, oh God, I don't know what it was. It was like 7:30 in the morning. So I think I started around 9:30 because it was pretty freaking early. So I've been in this chair longer than 12 hours, people, basically. I'm going to read a page that I'm supposed to just draw lines through, because I will not be able to fit it within the 20-page maximum allowed amount, which I'm starting to think is very unfair. Anyway, Mr. John Duncan disappears from Fraser Health Yale Road Center. This is number 68 on the original notice of claim of 171 pages that I'm supposed to reduce down to 20. On February 21st, 2015, Judy Chorney went back to Yale Road Center to see Mr. John Duncan, and when she arrived to his room and stood at the doorway entrance, she saw a situation where there was a group of strangers who who were surrounding Mr. Duncan's bed. As someone was in a hammock being moved around by that group of people, Judy Chorney asked where John Duncan was, and a woman replied back that Judy Chorney was being disrespectful and rude because Judy Chorney was mystified as to what was happening. Judy Chorney quickly left the entrance to the room from where she was standing and went to the doctor's station to ask where Mr. John Duncan was. This is when I discovered he was gone, people. Judy Chorney did not visit John Duncan on her birthday, February 20th, because I had seen him on the 19th, right, in 2015, because as previously stated, I've already stated it, but I'm stating it again, she was being falsely accused by Sharon Newall and by other Fraser Health staff of medically neglecting Mr. John Duncan because Judy Chorney would not sign their payment plan for convalescent care or for arrears that were accumulating at the temporary care ward at Yale Road Center. I have to admit this, people. I have to draw a line through this. Because if I don't, I'm not going to get anywhere near my 20 pages. But this is pertinent information. Yes, I'm making reference to being accused of medical neglect again, but I'm giving more detail in this specific instance where before it applied to a different instance. So I've mentioned it twice in my notice of claim for two separate incidences, but I have to pick and choose which are the priorities, because at some point we're going to remember this, even though technically it's not written down anymore anywhere. So, I mean, how are we supposed to talk about it if it's not written down, people, or if it's wiped out, if there's lines drawn through it and it becomes null and void? We're not going to talk about it. They say, oh, we'll talk about it in court, but we're not going to talk about it because it won't be highlighted because it's not in the amendment. So I went on the 21st instead. Right? When Judy Chorney got to the doctor's station, several people were in the room, and Judy Chorney asked where Mr. John Duncan was, with the reply being given back to her that he had been released. So I go to his room, I stand in the doorway, I see a bunch of strangers around his bed with somebody moving around in a hammock. But I can't see who's in the hammock because there's this group around him. I don't go into the room. I just say, where's John? Some woman hollers back at me and tells me I'm being rude, right? Because I'm asking where John is. So I leave. I go to the doctor's station to find out where he is, to only be told that he had been released. For the last 5.5 weeks prior to that release, we were fighting to get him to come home. Are you listening to this? This is why I'm dying, people. What you're watching is the death of a human being. Literally. Okay? B. And what I did is I put 68 A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and then I go on to 69, which technically you're not supposed to do that because you're supposed to break them up into numbered paragraphs. Now, I broke them up into paragraphs. There's paragraph 68, and then there's paragraph A connected to 68, paragraph B connected to 68, paragraph C connected to 68, but that's not what they want it. That's not the way they want it. They want it 68, 69, 70, 71, 72. Anyway, nobody would give her any details, and one Caucasian male doctor asked, who released John Duncan? The doctor said he would call the social worker, Sharon Newall, and asked Judy Chorney to wait. But because Judy Chorney was under subliminal and direct verbal attack by Sharon Newell and by other Fraser Health staff, she quickly left the building with Andre Chorney to never return back to Yale Road Center for fear of being falsely accused of something else. Marcaine Chorney also went to visit Mr. John Duncan on February 20th, 2015, after leaving his post-secondary studies for the afternoon, and learned on his own, just as had Judy Chorney, that Mr. John Duncan had simply disappeared. I can't write this in my notice of claim, people, because Fraser Health doesn't want to admit to that. Marcaine Chorney, too, left the facility as quickly as he could once being told by staff that Mr. John Duncan was no longer at Yale Road Center. Marcaine Chorney did not have a cell phone, and nor did Judy Chorney, so no one could inform any other family member as to what had happened until everyone else started to come home after their day was over. Shemaine Chorney and Tisha Chorney both learned that Mr. John Duncan had disappeared once they got home from working at McDonald's in Surrey, BC. Oh, what bad kids I had, people. I had kids in college. I had kids working. No wonder why security was called on them to protect Uncle John. What happened to Mr. John Duncan was very similar, check this one out, to what happened to Andre Chorney when Andre Chorney was wrongfully apprehended by the Ministry of Children and Family Development, MCFD. Mr. John Duncan simply disappeared without notice, just had Andre Chorney disappeared without notice and without reasonable cause and or explanation. Just disappear, people. And I'm not supposed to write that down because I'm not allowed to have enough pages to do that. That's on page 53. From 171. How far do you honestly think I'm going to get with this lawsuit? And isn't it interesting that MCFD should be showing up at my house? A house I've been living in for 7 years. You know, maintaining, right? Doing better than a lot of people out there are doing, despite everything negative that goes on in my life. Because people want to protect white-collar criminal activity and act like it doesn't even exist on the planet, as if it's just some fairy tale. Like, seriously. Judy Chorney had come to the conclusion that her discussion with Mr. John Duncan on February 19, 2015 was a direct threat to Sharon Newell and other Fraser Health staff, and including the Fraser Health Authority and its corporate agenda for the bottom dollar line, with its pay-as-you-go agenda for those elderly persons who can afford to pay for medical services despite not wanting them, and the agenda to continue to detain Mr. John Duncan unlawfully for that end goal. And because Mr. John Duncan himself had asked Judy Chorney to try and retain a lawyer, Mr. Paul Evans, Fraser Health staff, and their various agents went into panic mode and proceeded to facilitate the medical kidnapping of Mr. John Duncan to fulfill their long-term plan to eventually place him into a care home where he would have to pay for it, to which these Fraser Health agents, under the direction of their mandate, had already determined Mr. Duncan to be his end-of-life plan. That reads pretty fluent to me, people. So, Fraser Health can admit to that, or they can deny it. They don't want to admit to anything. They want to call that frivolous. H. Judy Chorney cannot say with 100% accuracy that Mr. John Duncan was not in his room, all bundled up in a medical hammock, surrounded by a bunch of strangers, because she herself did not approach his bed, as she only went as far into the room where the entrance door was. Although it was confirmed by Fraser Health staff at the doctor's station that Mr. John Duncan had been released from Yale Road Center and was no longer on the premises. Sounds like Fraser Health has to determine whether he was there or not. That's not up for me to determine. That's for them to determine. Because as far as I know, I'm not 100% sure, people. I'm not. They could have moved him after I showed up. Because they sure to hell were quick to put somebody else in there that couldn't even fucking walk. If they're bringing in somebody in a hammock, or taking somebody out in a hammock, Sierra Chorney, Marcaine Chorney, Shemaine Chorney, Tisha Chorney, Andre Chorney, and Judy Chorney all went into instant shock on February 21st, 2015, despite previously sensing intuitively or knowing outright that there was an undertone of maleficence, professional malice, malpractice, and an arrogant misrepresentation regarding the unlawful detainment of Mr. John Duncan, as Judy Chorney was being slandered and falsely accused through defamation of character, through malicious prosecution by Sharon Newell and other Fraser Health staff, where Judy Chorney has yet to be charged of a crime 2 years after the fact of Mr. John Duncan's untimely disappearance from Yale Road Center. Over the next several days, a deep depression overtook every member. This is statement of facts, people. With allegations that Fraser Health can say, no, we were not practicing professional malice. No, we weren't practicing malpractice with an arrogant misrepresentation regarding the unlawful detainment of Mr. John Duncan. They can deny that. They can agree to it, or they can deny it. Why should I have to omit it? In order to fit that information, which is 74... See how tired I am? 74 sections under the Criminal Code of Canada. We haven't gotten into the mail fraud yet. We haven't gotten into the bank fraud yet. We haven't gotten into the credit card fraud yet. We haven't gotten into a whole lot of fucking shit yet. And if I read you what a cop in training wrote, I tell you, you'd be aghast. Seriously, you'd be aghast. Because it's nothing compared to what I wrote. And what I need to write, and what I need to express to the court, I can remove, I've removed a lot, people, don't get me wrong, I can remove, but I can't remove that. That's too important. Because that's where it's coming down to, is the gist of it, right? John simply disappeared, right? I'm sure they didn't whisk him off in a hammock, but do we really know, considering that he just disappeared? And just to finish off page 53, let's just read. Over the next several days, a deep depression overtook every member of the Chorney family as everyone struggled to try and understand what had happened. But also everyone tried to comprehend what would be the ramifications of Mr. John Duncan no longer being in the family home as he had been for the last 23 years plus. B. Everyone felt extremely uncomfortable frightened, confused, lonely, and unsure as to what to do next. Do you see, people? They don't want you to know how to write fluently. And if you do that, they punish you. They stifle you. They oppress you, just like they have done over the years with the nonprofit. They want you to type out the information if you got it in you so that they can pick through it and learn how to fill in the fucking blanks or fill in the holes so that you can't bust through if you're born into poverty. And people, I was born into poverty. Okay? And no matter how well you write, or whatever it is that you think you do in life that's good, for the ones that run the show, they want to stifle it. They don't want to take the time to read this, even though you paid, and the court is supposed to be for the public. This master's telling me no judge wants to take time to read this, and that I should be thankful that some lawyer at Fraser Health Authority took the time to read this. But I still need to bring it down to 20 pages. Everyone felt extremely uncomfortable, frightened, confused, lonely, and unsure as what to do next, and remained in a traumatized, heightened state that was psychologically tormenting to each member of Mr. John Duncan's immediate family. Are you listening to this? The raw memories of Andre Chorney's wrongful apprehension by MCFD and the emotional pain from that experience put the household into an agitated position where it allowed Fraser Health staff and Mr. John Duncan's extended family in Victoria, also known as the Duncan clan, to continue to build on to the idea that any member in John Duncan's immediate family showing any kind of grievance to the circumstances was inappropriate towards Fraser Health staff and any member to the Duncan clan. So somehow, successfully, the Fraser Health Authority and the Duncan clan reversed the situation and put themselves into a victim position, and my family, Uncle John's immediate family, wasn't allowed to grieve. Never mind, fight back and stand up for ourselves and go find Uncle John and bring him home.